Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to donate to Palestine and to support the channel. Islamophobic Zionist Douglas Murray went viral recently in regard to the UK riots for some previous comments he made about Muslim immigration to the West and was being accused of inciting violence himself like the rest of the bigots in his peer group. Take a look.
But clearly they've lost control of the streets. Now, is it time to send in the army at some point? Probably yes. But if the army will not be sent in, then the public will have to go in, and the public will have to sort this out themselves. And it'll be very, very brutal. I don't want them to live here. I don't want them here. They came under false pretenses. Many of them came illegally and continue to come illegally, and we don't want them here. And I'm perfectly willing to say that because it needs to be said. I really don't want to hear Allahu Akbar shouted again on my streets. It's a war cry.
To be fair, this clip is from an interview he did months before the riots. However, we must be clear these riots did not take place because of an overnight shift in anti-Muslim sentiment, which has been brewing for years now, but has especially escalated since Israel's latest and continued attack on Palestine over the last year, which, as you know, comes with an avalanche of propaganda to justify the relentless oppression of the Palestinian people. And Douglas Murray is a chief instigator and poster boy for spreading Israeli propaganda. And it's not just his anti-Muslim views that justify him taking this position. He has literally been tied in with the Israeli government's Zionist politicians for years now. Take a look at this.
Murray has recently become more transparently pro-Israel. His relationship with the Zionist entity is nothing new. Alongside Executive Director Alan Mendoza, Douglas Murray served as a director of the Henry Jackson Society for many years. Mendoza is also simultaneously the president of the JNF, the biggest settlement building body in Palestine. The patrons include the Israeli president and prime minister. The Henry Jackson Society, in fact, shares funders with the West Bank illegal settlement and the Israeli military. While in occupied Palestine, Murray spent time with President Isaac Herzog and was gifted a map of occupied Palestine by Israeli military personnel. He all but took up arms himself in the war on Gaza. This advocate for genocide will certainly find it hard to find support outside of the Zionist entity.
As you saw, Murray is in business with Zionist politicians that run organizations that build illegal settlements on Palestinian land that even the Israeli Prime Minister and President have stakes in. And here is Douglas Murray receiving an award from the Israeli President for his underhanded services during the current Gaza genocide. Let's bring it back to the UK for a moment. Murray has made a career out of promoting Islamophobia from not only his online presence, but also from the numerous books he has published expressing his opposition to immigration, Islam and Muslims. Here he is speaking about the former Scottish First Minister becoming the first ever Muslim leader of a Western country.
The man who ended up becoming First Minister of Scotland is a very openly practicing Muslim and had himself photographed on his first day in office with a group of other Muslims doing the Islamic prayers in the First Minister's office, bending to Mecca. If Kate Forbes had become leader and promptly posted a photograph of her and some others taking Holy Communion, I think it would have been an uproar. Why would that have been the case, but no uproar for Hamza Yusuf doing the Islamic prayers in the office? Because we want everybody to have religious freedom except ourselves. We want to praise every tradition apart from our own. And we want to promote every belief system other than the one that got us here. That is madness.
Okay, so firstly, Murray is a homosexual atheist. He spoke about Kate Forbes, a Scottish Christian politician not being elected over Hamza Yusuf, a Scottish Muslim politician, and how if Kate Forbes had been elected and had performed a Christian prayer publicly in the office like Hamza Yusuf performed a Muslim prayer, they would have been outraged. This is preposterous. However, there was an actual outrage that swung the election in Hamza Yusuf's favour that Murray failed to mention, and that was due to Kate Forbes stating that because of her Christian faith, she could not be tolerant of homosexuality, whereas Hamza Yusuf said that despite his Muslim faith, he was tolerant of it, for which he did receive quite a lot of backlash from Muslims. Kate's views are similar to Candace Owens, another devout Christian.
Think about same-sex marriage.
It's a sin.
You think it's a sin? So you think I'm sinful?
What's that?
You think I'm sinful because I'm married to a man?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes, okay. You're sinning. You are in a sinful relationship. I actually don't believe marriage can be between two men.
It's clear Douglas is merely using Christianity as yet another guise to take shots at Muslims and Islam, when in reality the Christian faith is not compatible with his chosen lifestyle either. As I said, Murray has been very vocal with his biased pro-Israel narrative, and one of his main arguments has been that criticising Israel committing genocide in Gaza is a form of anti-Semitism deep-rooted in Muslims, and that Muslims don't care about their fellow Muslims going through genocides in other countries, and are simply singling out Israel due to prejudice against Jewish people. Needless to say, this is utter nonsense. Let's take a look.
You can criticise Israel without being anti-Jewish, they say.
Yeah, not really. Not really, I think. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been killed in the last 12 years by Bashar al-Assad and other Muslims in the civil war in Syria. We have seen hundreds of thousands of people killed in the last decade in Yemen, Muslims. There's no one on the streets. Nobody's marching. Muslims do not love other Muslims. They have no love for them. They have no love for the Palestinian peoples. None. If they had any, the Jordanians would have taken in the West Bank Palestinians, the Egyptians would have taken in the territory they used to run, the Gaza, and they would have taken in the Palestinians from the Gaza. What do they mind? One thing: Jews living and Jews winning. It hits them deep in their soul, in their psyche. It's an ancient, ancient hatred. And we've imported it. I think that if you are zooming in on Israel, you're not motivated by anything other than being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. At times in the past, it was the case that people didn't like Jews because they were seen to be a different religion. And then after the wars of religion, you couldn't hate anyone for their religion, so people started to hate the Jews for their race. And after the Holocaust, you couldn't hate people because of their race anymore, so people hated the Jews because of their nation.
Firstly, Murray is full of hot air. Someone can criticise Israel and Zionism and at the same time have no prejudice towards Jewish people, which is evident from thousands of members of the Jewish community marching with Muslims, Christians and even atheists in solidarity against Israel's war crimes in Palestine. Secondly, Murray made the claim that Muslims are ignoring the atrocities that Muslims carry out against other Muslims in places like Syria and Yemen, etc., because there are no marches or demonstrations in the West. This is a far reach to justify the genocide in Gaza. There are in-house problems between Muslims with no Western involvement that we are vocal about and that Muslim nations are handling internally. That's like me saying, why is Douglas Murray not speaking about white-on-white crime in the UK? And why is he not arranging marches in Muslim countries regarding that? Israel was created by the UK, is funded by the USA, and NATO, which consists of mostly Western nations, is turning a blind eye to Israel's war crimes, meaning we are perfectly entitled to march and protest in the West to oppose this. Thirdly, as far as Murray's claims that Muslims don't love Muslims, for which he cited Egypt and Jordan not taking in the Palestinians, this is a common bigot tactic. The government officials of these nations do not represent the majority of Muslims who are ordinary citizens around the world, just like Western governments do not represent the majority of their citizens. Look at how Muslims support each other at these marches and online. It's clear that the majority of Muslims care deeply about their fellow Muslims. And lastly, Murray claims that any pro-Palestine stance is anti-Jewish and equated any opposition to Israel as disguised prejudice towards Judaism. This is absolute nonsense. Opposing Zionism is not anti-Jewish. Zionism is a nationalist political movement that utilized ethnic cleansing to exercise racial superiority, whereas Judaism is a religion and being Jewish is a race and a culture. Not all Jewish people are Zionists and not all Zionists are Jewish, and Douglas Murray is a prime example of this. But since Murray thinks all Muslims discriminate against Israel on the basis of anti-Semitism, let's take a look at what two Christians, Russell Brand and Candace Owens, had to say specifically about his claims.
When you say that there are unexplored and seldom discussed narratives when it comes to ethnic cleansing or the extermination of peoples, is it interesting that that's an argument that's also used by people with regard to this particular issue on the diametrically opposed side? In that recent debate between Mehdi Hussein and Douglas Murray, Douglas Murray uses the idea that anti-Semitism in the sort of common dialectic highlights Israeli war crimes, highlighting Israel's actions while ignoring sort of Muslim violence on other Muslims or the genocides in Syria. Genocide is not an event that was unique to World War II. I think all of us are kind of peripherally aware of the Uyghurs being sort of persecuted and executed in China. We're aware that genocide is appears to be a part of human history. Are you saying that in some way, and in particular, the idea of Holocaust and genocide has been appropriated and used to facilitate Israeli foreign policy? And if that is what you're saying, I wonder how we look at, for example, as a British person, Britain's role in the balkanization and rebordering of that region, the Balfour Treaty and the Second World War. Because if we're going to start looking at various narratives, which I suppose we must, then how is it that we find truth there when there are so many, it seems to me at least, potential truths?
So one of the things that I did when I started becoming interested in this and recognizing that I had been severely lied to is I wanted to make sure that I was reading sources that would not be deemed anti-Semitic. So I started reading Israeli historians and was very shocked to discover that Theodor Herzl wrote in his book, this is a person who's hailed as a hero, that he would kill as many Jews as he needed to get Israel established as a state. That was just something that he felt was a sacrifice that needed to happen if Israel needed to become a state. This is, long before World War II. Absolutely, just to be clear, that genocide and Holocaust has been appropriated to further Israel's interest. There's no question about that. I did an entire episode talking about the German genocide, and I raised one issue in that episode, which is that if Israel is the state that needed to exist, as we are told in America, because of the Holocaust, because Jews needed a home, and because they were put into concentration camps, then why is it that a Jewish man who ran a concentration camp in peacetime and mass murdered Christians in Czechoslovakia, why is it that that man was protected by the state of Israel, even though he was wanted for war crimes? This is just a fact. He was protected by them until the day he died. There's a lot of criminals who mass murdered Christians who were protected by the state of Israel. I believe that Christians in the West have been propagandized against Christians in the East.
Russell Brand, and more so Candace Owens, debunked Douglas Murray's paid shill Zionist propaganda. Russell posed the question whether Israel is using the horrible atrocities suffered by Jewish people during World War II to justify their political policies. He also implied that the UK are complicit in Israel's war crimes because it was Britain that divided Palestine and gave it to the now Israelis in 1948. And this colonization was planned via the Balfour Treaty, which was actually drafted in 1917, around 30 years before the Second World War, which the Palestinians never agreed to. Russell also pointed out Douglas Murray's sly tactic of calling any criticism of Israel anti-Semitic, by Murray claiming Muslims ignore other genocides due to discrimination against Jewish people. Look, all genocides are wrong. However, Israel's oppression of Palestine has been the longest oppression of Muslims in modern history. This is why our voices are so loud and why we feel so strongly about it. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And just because the people who are carrying out a genocide happen to be or claim to be Jewish, they should not be exempt for being held accountable, even if they have experienced a similar atrocity in the past. I like how Candace spoke about her studying Israeli historians in order to avoid accusations of anti-Semitism. She referred to Theodor Herzl, who invented Zionism in 1897 and stated that he advocated for violence against Jewish people in order to establish Israel, which further proves there is a clear difference between being a Zionist and being Jewish. Candace also stated that despite this being planned before World War II, Israel has appropriated and manipulated the genocide of Jewish people during the Second World War to further their oppressive political aims. Candace went on to say that Israel has protected many war criminals who have committed genocide against Christians, and that Christians in the West have been turned against Christians in the East. And that could not be more evident through how many Christians, but not all Christians, support what is happening to Muslims and also to Christians in Palestine. And this totally destroys Douglas Murray's false narrative and his cheap propaganda. Nobody has immunity to commit genocide, and using a tragic genocide of Jewish people to justify similar behaviour against Muslims and Christians in Palestine in the modern era not only lacks complete morality, but it also undermines everyone that tragically lost their lives in past atrocities. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group via the link in the description, where we as Muslims can speak freely and without censorship about issues like this. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.